Hi there, everyone. This is Sarah from Myosh. Welcome to our webinar today. Today's webinar is titled BErTHA, 4 Pillars for the Next Gen WHS Management. Before I introduce our presenter, Joe Kitney, just to let you know that there will be some opportunities to chat. Please, I think Joe's going to ask a couple of questions, so please use the chat panel to answer those. As with all our webinars, we are recording this. They do attract Australian Institute of Health and Safety CPD points. If you want to know more about that, you can ask me or talk to them directly. And we will send out an email today that will include a recording of the webinar and a podcast for you to share if you want to do that. So Joe Kitney is going to be presenting today. She's the Managing Director of Kitney Occupational Health and Safety. Joe has 25 plus years experience working in Australia and the UK, and a strong appreciation of the importance of insights and instinct in driving practices and standards for health and safety at work. It's based in Brisbane. Joe is the Managing Director of Kitney and Toolkit Solutions, and a Director of Jamble, an Indigenous consultancy based in Cairns. Joe works across industry with small, medium and large organisations. And WHS regulator, workers' compensation, insurer, unions and employer associations, and is a strong supporter of the Australian Institute of Health and Safety, and appointed as the chair of the Australian Institute of Health and Safety Certification Governance Committee, and is a member of the College of Fellows. When Joe's not working, you'll find her spending time with family and sailing on Moreton Bay. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That's quite a lengthy list of many years in industry, and I guess that's really the basis for coming into the presentation here, is to be able to share our insights and knowledge that led to the development of the model called BErTHA. And so thank you so much, Sarah, and to Myosh for letting us be able to present during the webinar today. So I'm going to dive straight in and just cover off the subjects that I'll be covering over the next sort of 40 to 50 minutes. And you're correct, Sarah, there is an opportunity to have some chat. And so we have the chat open, and anything that comes back that might be a good discussion point, we have plenty of time within the webinar here to be able to do that. So just thinking through in terms of what we're going to cover, I'm going to actually first start with a little bit of positioning, and that really is about us. So that's about Kitney, not because we're trying to promote ourselves, but actually the solid basis on which we provide services and have had experience across industry over the years actually led to BErTHA. And it was the combination of those, myself and those in the team. So I want to give an acknowledgement to the inputs that actually led to the creation of the model, acknowledge the changing times, and so therefore actually we need to be progressive in terms of moving forward, talk about BErTHA and what those 4 pillars actually mean, how they come together in order to achieve the vision and goals and the outcomes for the business. Look at a case study, so provide you just a simple application in practice so you can see how we pick BErTHA apart and put a business through its paces in terms of trying to understand where it's at and where it wants to go to. And then think about, well, where is health and safety going to in the future? And that's a combination of us as health and safety individuals, but also thinking about business and business capability. And there's an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. And then I think, Sarah, you're also going to provide a link at some point so that anybody that wants to see the model in real life, they can hop onto the Kitney website and have a look. So thank you for that. Okay, so a little bit about us. So for Kitney, from a Kitney perspective, we probably for the last 10 years have really focused on consultancy, and by extension that's also meant that we've developed out many health and safety systems and built lots of capability across businesses. Primarily we work within Queensland, but some of our clients have operations across Australia and overseas, so it gives us quite a lot of industry breadth experience. It's not just coming from a Queensland base. The consultants that we choose, tertiary qualified, strategic thinking, but also operationally focused as well. So we've got some practitioners that work with us to make sure that we keep our feet grounded on the floor. The systems that we've got, either working within third-party systems or operating out of whatever IT platform they have. And then education and coaching to enable the business. So that's our sort of core services. In terms of our team, and more importantly also our networks and partnerships. So within our team, we actually have health and safety staff, but we also have an IT team. And that is a recognition of the changing times for health and safety and having the ability and the capability to respond to business needs at our fingertips, rather than having to go out in order to find that expertise outside where we can't actually do it internally within the business. And so there's just an example of some of the organisations that we work with. So we're the health and safety partner for CCIQ here in Queensland, and also provide expertise out for Queensland leaders, and then work with a number of IT companies to help enable our customers, clients, to meet their business needs. So in terms of Jumble, those who haven't heard of Jumble before, Jamin Wilcox is the managing director. He's based up in Cairns. And so what Jamin provides is actually insights, not only from a sort of non-Indigenous business perspective, but also Indigenous. And so we're able to factor that in to thinking about how we meet business and breadth of business needs going forward. So put all of that in the melting pot, and that gave us really good insights in order to be able to create BErTHA a couple of years ago. So who do we work with? There's just an example: large, small, regional, rural, metro-based. We're quite happy working with whomever, as long as they've got a dedication and a focus on health and safety, then we're definitely behind them and happy to work with them. So in terms of our values, the values that we have here are actually really important as the basis for BErTHA. And that really is our fourth value, which is respect for the future. So looking and saying, well, where's health and safety at now? Where is business at? What are the changing trends and times? What are the increasing expectations on those working in health and safety, and how equipped are we to be able to deliver them? And then thinking about how we build our business capability, those that we work with in health and safety, and then also the customers that we've got. So respect has always been a core value, but definitely respect for the future was an important aspect in the development of BErTHA. So thinking about changing times, anybody working in health and safety would know that the times are changing, whether it's legislative change or, introduction of new codes of practice or the international standard for health and safety. Business needs, we can see that there are demands being placed on those that run businesses, work within businesses, and indeed work within health and safety. The challenge for us is actually how do we understand and respond to those. So this is where we can acknowledge the past and then also move forward. So we can see, even just within this photo alone, the changing times of a London landscape with the high vis and the fall protection, the colour photograph, as opposed to the New York scene that you see on the left-hand side. There were implications for those that were involved in that photograph in London, but the fact is it also is an acknowledgement of the fact that health and safety is moving and changing, and the importance of moving and changing with the times with it. So when we take a look at health and safety, and I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the maturity curve for health and safety, we know that there are levels on which a business may move through in order to both define or manage its health and safety, and then really get that optimised approach so that they get the return on investment, that the investments they put in for health and safety actually give them more than just their health and safety compliance and needs being met. Importantly, what you see on the dial on the right-hand side here is the conceptual model that takes us through the phases of health and safety systems or management within a business. So that's going from, we'll often get asked to be able to provide some support at the concept or the development phase. Can we have a health and safety system? And what we try and encourage businesses to do is then have that implementation plan for follow through. We also get asked to come in at the rationalise and mature phase, where they've had a system, maybe it's morphed and grown, and we're now in the process of helping them declutter, for example. So definitely we've got a health and safety service that we will step in at whatever phase, but generally speaking, these are the areas where we see that most businesses find that they're looking for support and need. And it's not just in relation to the system, it's actually in relation to the way in which health and safety is managed, the capability of the business, and the opportunities that it has then to engage and manage its resources well. So if we're actually looking therefore at business expectations, I'm assuming that some of you may well have experienced this within your own practice or your own areas of work. The business expectations for health and safety are growing. That's in response to regulator, legal cases, expectations for obligations, and then even just a recognition of the importance of understanding how health and safety fits within business. So what we're actually noticing, and we had noticed in our own performance, so this is, looking back, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, was that we would have conversations with business owners and CEOs and boards, and we found that we were continually needing to up our game in order to be able to understand and meet the business needs. So we had a period of having to look at that, both ourselves, but also for the companies that we're working with. And really the challenging question is, how do you respond to business needs and ensure that the expectations of the company are actually being met? So what we found was that, yep, they can absolutely be done through training, through providing support, opportunities, but also looking for the business investment that needs to be made, and not just expecting those working in health and safety to be able to necessarily understand or meet those broader business perspectives as opposed to just health and safety. So if I think back a couple of years ago, I actually was lucky enough to attend a presentation from the QUT Business School, and it was actually a really interesting presentation because it wasn't looking just at health and safety, it was more just thinking about business skills. But what it did flag was the importance of technical and key skills. And so whilst we as health and safety individuals may have our subject matter expertise, our training and experience at whatever level that we're operating at, it may not necessarily meet the full broader needs that sit within a business. And so over the last few years, we've started to identify for ourselves, but also when we're working within a business, what the broader business expectations or needs are. So anybody now that's working in health and safety or is responsible for managing health and safety probably needs to couple their subject matter expertise, their training and experience with an understanding of business. There'll be some IT or analytic elements in there for pulling off data and performance reporting. We've got to be able to influence and do presentations and engage and at times negotiate, particularly if we're looking at putting budgets together or programs for health and safety. There's a certain amount of self-awareness and personal development, so that ownership that we take in order to keep ourselves current and responsive. And then obviously the tactical aspects of risk, but also introducing change and project management. So when we couple those together, we're actually starting to enter a very different phase of capability and enabling businesses from a health and safety perspective. I won't go into it in too much great depth, but as the chair of the Certification Governance Committee that's run for the WHS certification program with the Australian Institute of Health and Safety, that definitely recognises capability. Now, if you aren't familiar with the program, it would be worthwhile hopping on and having a look, both for yourselves but others that you may work with in health and safety, because the capability program enables that pathing through the levels of a career and expectation. Very importantly though, sitting behind it sits the capability framework, and that is created by INCHCO. The Australian Institute of Health and Safety were important inputs into the program that was created there. And it was really the recognition of the capability framework coupled with those insights that we've developed over years that started me and the Kitney team thinking more broadly than just our technical skills and expertise in order to deliver on health and safety. So where does that leave us? Firstly, before I dive into talking about BErTHA, and BErTHA model comes up next, I'd actually love to throw the chat open and just ask what your experiences are in the changing needs for times, for demands. So I think we'll just take a pause here for 30, 60 seconds. And if you've got the opportunity to just pop something in the chat on your experience of changing times and demands for health and safety.
I don't see anything coming through just yet, Jo, but...
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you. I'll probably wait just a couple more seconds and then I can keep presenting. It's actually really interesting looking for feedback because it's a question that sometimes we don't ask ourselves. So I appreciate this is a question without notice, but any thoughts or experiences that anybody's got in terms of your experience and you'd like to share with others, it's always a really good opportunity in the MyOsh webinars to be able to do so.
Yes, and it is really interesting to see what other people think. and I think people like the interaction. And I think just a reminder to tell people that they can add their thoughts at any time during the webinar, because we can all see them when they come up. Renee has actually just said, I found we are becoming more aligned to engineers and having a broader perspective. Oh, it's like I've opened the floodgates.
That's great. Engineers. Oh, do you know, Renee, that's so true. I was working with somebody yesterday that comes from an engineering background in health and safety, so process safety for them and being able to look at that broader expectations, really important. Becoming a generalist versus a specialist from Daryl, very important. Hi, David. Long time since we've been in contact. Nice to see that you're on the line here. Oh, got you.
So are you going to read these? Do you want me to read them out, Jo? Or
yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that would be fantastic. Sarah.
Okay, so Roy has said financial awareness and return on investment and budgeting. Greg has said, okay, now work increased expectations with no increased funding.
Yes. Yeah.
Daryl has said more is being required of us as the face of safety changes, and also generalist versus specialist.
Very true.
David has said, have been in the field for more than 40 years and have seen all the legislation put in place, have been concerned in recent years that safety appears to be being dumbed down to a lowest common denominator level rather than striving to achieve the higher level of understanding and skill. Renee has said, haha, I'm currently working on the process procedure. Ray has said, we went through several database options, but they did not work together with SharePoint. Okay, and Daniel says, I've definitely seen a change in moving towards safety management involving interaction between safety professionals and people, and being so much more involved in the management of the business rather than being a side thought, which sounds good.
Absolutely. Great. That's great feedback. Thank you so much, everybody, for your insights. There's always a horrifying moment, isn't there, when you ask for feedback and you don't get any. So thank you so much for giving your thoughts there. So picking up actually every single aspect of the chat that's come through, I'd like to think that the BErTHA model actually provides at least a basic foundation for how you might address each of those. And that's because it starts to tackle not just health and safety management, but really business management. So we've coupled this, we've named this the 4 pillars for health and safety management. I guess that's because we think of vision, goals and outcomes as being the aspirational point that we go to. But equally, it is in itself its own pillar. So recognising the importance of knowing where that is in order to then bring your 4 pillars to the fore is really important. So what I'm going to do is just take you on our little journey of how we envisaged BErTHA, how she came to life. And then I can talk to you about the case study that I've got and give you an example of how we're starting to use the model. So responding to need. So we know that there is a gap and that we have to aspirationally look up in order to be able to respond to that. And the biggest challenge really is how do we go forward on that one? Probably from our journeys perspective, I'll be honest and say it wasn't always the easiest of journeys. So talking to business owners, talking to those in health and safety, looking at, what does the future hold from a business perspective and where is health and safety going to fit within it, has meant that we certainly did wiggle on our response curve. But I'd like to say that we have always continued to shoot high in order to enable that understanding, and for us as a business, but more importantly, for the businesses that we work with and others that we come in contact with through health and safety. So there were probably a couple of pivotal points in time. So I just want to flag these because, the outcome of everything all starts with a point and then there's a journey beyond. So for me, the introduction of BErTHA really came out of the Visions Conference, which is the Australian Institute of Health and Safety's conference here in Queensland. And that was in 2018. So there I was at the Visions Conference and I was listening to the presentations and I thought, gosh, I've been in this for 20 years. Not quite as long as you, David, but I'm catching up. And I thought, gosh, what is it that's new? Because I was hearing a lot of similar and same information. And I realized that actually maybe my role was actually start to couple the knowledge and the experience I had with just being able to forward think. And so the Visions Conference really made me start thinking about business capability and IT capability within business. The Health and Safety Queensland, we have a very active board here. So the Board of Health and Safety Queensland back in 2019 produced their 5-year strategic plan. And importantly, they put embracing innovation and technology as one of the strategic levers. So the recognition that we're now shifting not just into what you need to do for health and safety, but the enablers to help you do that. So these items here started to get me thinking about, well, where are we moving from and to? So up until about 2019, we'd used a number of models. We've always used models within the business because a picture paints 1,000 words. It makes it easier for a business owner or who we're talking to understand what we're saying. So here's just an example of some of the models we've used. So we've always emphasised the importance of making time for health and safety, sufficient knowledge, and having the right systems and information. So that was always there. We wanted to make sure that the business met its compliance or other obligations, that there was assurance processes in place, and that in the event of needing to demonstrate something, there were records or others available. And we had a slight variation on the Swiss cheese model, looking at the different elements of the cheese and how having the necessary controls in place meant that we would be able to prevent incidents. So we've always used models and they've always stood us in really good stead. Moving forward though, I was like, okay, so what does the next model look like? What's the next level for health and safety? And really that's where the perspective of looking at BErTHA came out. So when you actually look at the BErTHA model, you'll see that at first glance, there's nothing really in there about health and safety, because actually what we're wanting to do is to put health and safety within the mainstream of business management. So it sits firmly in that green quadrant at the top. It says that it's a system or the processes, but it sits in the context of how the business manages itself and the other processes and arrangements that it has. So that's that better integration of health and safety across business. But we know that it has to have something with it to enable that to happen. Over the last few years, there's been a lot of focus on culture and leadership and individuals' responsibility and due diligence. So the blue quadrant was a given. The yellow quadrant at the bottom, we've known about health and safety performance reporting, preferably including your lead indicators, not just your lag indicators, and continuous improvement, so making those strides. So we knew those existed. It was really how we enabled it. So coupling an understanding of where the business is going to and what its visions and outcomes are and how health and safety can support and enable that, as well as keep people safe and preventing harm, meant that we needed that added quadrant. And really that's where innovation and technology came in. And of course, if we look at most health and safety training courses at whatever level, they don't necessarily speak to innovation. And so how do we get innovation into health and safety? So by very deliberately identifying that as a quadrant, it forced us, therefore, when we were talking to business, not just to say, what do you want to do and what's going to be in the system, but more importantly, how are you going to make it happen? So it challenges that space. And interestingly, when we talk to businesses, we'll often find that it's the health and safety innovation that we make that helps to lead the way in the business moving forward. So they make some strides forward in order to deliver on health and safety, which then also enables and enhances overall business management. So the acronym for BErTHA really comes through from business people, technology, systems, assurance and governance. So that's where the BErTHA title came from. And there's a link down there that I think Sarah's also going to pop in the chat so that you can see her on the Kitney website. So that is about from 2019 onwards, we've been doing BErTHA. If we actually looked though and said, well, is there a deeper origin here and why pick the title BErTHA? So you can probably tell, and those that know me, I'm from the UK. I moved over here about 15 or 16 years ago now. And in my youth, so this is taking me way, way back to about the 1970s, there was actually a cartoon series, there you go, mid-80s, sorry. There was a cartoon series that ran for approximately a year called BErTHA. And she was a machine that sat within Spottiswoode and Company. And every day after school, I'd be going back and watching BErTHA because it was actually really interesting seeing how this company would use the BErTHA, the machine, and she would solve problems or produce the right thing that needed to be manufactured. And programmed right, she can actually produce just about anything. So those of you that again can probably hop online and Google BErTHA UK cartoon series, and you'd be able to hop on and you'd be able to see who BErTHA is and how she exists. But interestingly, she actually does have those components which fit really well for health and safety. So if we take the 4 pillars and we then know what the goals are, we can actually use those, program it right, then we can actually make health and safety do what it's intended to be for that business. So let's go and have a look over there at the pillars of BErTHA. So what you can see is that we need to then look and say, well, the origins, what is the information that we can draw on in order to give the foundations for the way in which BErTHA works. So we know there are changing times for health and safety. So whether it's legislation, new ISO 45001 standard, there is a plethora of information available to us to be able to draw on at whatever stage in our career and experience to give us the foundations to say, well, what needs to be managed from a health and safety perspective. Talking to those working within business gives us the ability then to see where does it fit, not only from the health and safety system, but in terms of that broader business management. Here in Queensland, and I refer to Queensland, but equally other states and territories and globally, there's information on culture and leadership. So there are also models that we can lean on. And if we start putting those models about people with the system model, and if we couple it then with some governance and assurance models, it starts to present a really quite neat web of information and abilities to be able to take ourselves forward. When we actually then make it really smart, and this is really where the innovation piece comes in. So rather than relying on individuals to do the right thing and make sure that they have done those pre-start checks or put in information that perhaps doesn't then produce a good data and report at the end of it, we can actually use innovation technology to make it easier for people to understand and complete the tasks that they have for health and safety, send reminders, and be able to then take data and be able to produce reports that matter at a business level. So that's really the concept for BErTHA and where that comes from. So if we were looking at innovation in technology, we have used, I did a safety and technology event here for the Australian Institute of Health and Safety just before COVID. And it was interesting, I put it on the grounds that I wanted to share innovation as a really important tool for those working in health and safety to enable themselves within their business. What's interesting is as well as the health and safety people attending, we actually had a number of businesses that felt that their technology could contribute to health and safety. So whether it was a drone or other, they were providing solutions that could be used in business. So I think this is the kind of the next forum, the next sort of arena that we're stepping into. It's a bit of a challenge, obviously, because of COVID, but equally we're now doing virtual working and able to do virtual health and safety. So there's been some benefits that's come out of the last year or so. In terms of where we go to next, before I step in and give you the case study on BErTHA, I'd love to just get your thoughts and see whether or not the model resonates with you. And does it capture the areas that you think are important for health and safety? Because we're not necessarily protecting our knowledge or IP on this. I'm actually really happy to share it because it's such a simple model. So question to yourselves is, your thoughts on BErTHA. Does the model resonate and capture the areas that you think are important for health and safety? So Sarah, I'm going to give it at least 30 to 45 seconds before we worry about getting any chat come back, because I think it takes a few seconds for people to get their thoughts together and then be able to provide a response. I'm just reading here actually on the chat, we've got Morn Wild. So you've got nice to review this model and see the concept. Thank you for the feedback there. Roy, you've said that it does, that's great, thank you. It's always interesting doing, as a health and safety professional, we have our ways of practicing, but when we share it with others, it's really helpful to get feedback just to see whether or not you're on the right track yourself. Yeah, thanks Ray as well, great. And David, do you want to give the feedback, Sarah? That's probably better if you do, because I'm busy reading and absorbing. It's probably easier if you read it out. thinking Sarah's not there. That's okay. I'll start reading them through. Okay, so...
Sorry, I was
you are there, Sarah.
I was, and I was speaking to myself, let me tell you.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, so Morn has said, being from an aviation background, we also use the 4 pillars as well as our safety management systems. And he's also mentioned policies and procedures, risk management, quality assurance, training and promotion. And he's also appreciates the fact that we're reviewing this model and concept. Rosemary has said, I'm currently using the HOP model. I think that's human organisational performance. And how do you see BErTHA sitting with this? I don't know if you want to answer that before I go on, Jo.
No, you're right. We'll cover that one at the end. Thanks for that.
Ray says this really resonates with the need to have an integrated management system approach, which I have been searching to apply. David said the model does capture one of the key elements that I've been talking about for years, and that is that WHS has to be embedded into the way the business is run on a day-to-day basis, not just bolted on at the end. And Jane said the model definitely resonates with the changing expectation of WHS in business. Crossover with people and culture is growing, more present, and the acknowledgement of the need to innovate lends itself well to organisational learning. Rakul Kumar says, I think it's a good model to follow and loves the concept of BErTHA. And Greg says, similar model to the aviation safety ICAO manual and the CASA version. It will work, but implementation is the key. There's also some coming through on the Q&A panel, some comments. More visibility and focus moved from normal health and safety matters to more mental wellness / COVID related. And also that the 4 pillars represent a strong foundation. So over to you, Jo.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's actually really, really fantastic feedback. And certainly, I agree with you there. I'm just going to hop back up to the HOP model. So Rosemary, yeah, definitely the next step for us is actually to see how this fits within other models. And I think that the ability to look therefore at those HOP approaches, so the humanistic approaches, as well as the sort of more functional approaches that we've got here, there's real opportunities just to look at how those might blend together. Oh, sorry, flicked my way through too quickly. Okay. So in terms of the case study and application for practice, so this is, I guess, where the magic starts to happen. And as Naomi, our Director of Strategic Solutions, would say, that the secret sauce. So just looking therefore at how we use the model in practice. So the scenario that we've got, this is what we were presented with. So we were asked by a medium-sized business based in Queensland who provide education training courses to industry. So these are trades type courses. So they're going out and they're working in workshop environments and training up apprentices and others to be able to fulfill their apprenticeship and then their trade skills. So the training itself involves a certain degree of risk and competency requirements for those that are trainers. So what they were wanting to do was improve their health and safety management, and they knew that they needed to improve both their system but also their internal capability, but they had been unable to recruit for the role. And so we didn't necessarily know the background for the reasons why they couldn't, but what they approached us for was to see if we could understand their needs, provide them with a roadmap and build their health and safety capability so that then they would then be able to manage and maintain their health and safety going forward. So what we kind of identified was there's this build thing, and then there's the manage and maintenance piece. And the skill sets that they were looking for weren't necessarily able to cover the breadth of those with the individuals that were interested in applying for the role. So we did what every good business should do, and that's a discovery. We took the time to really unpick where they were at and do a gap analysis. So looking at their health and safety and business needs, where their capability was, and then we also looked for areas for action and very deliberately used the BErTHA model for it. So we're putting BErTHA through her paces to see if we can actually check to make sure that she lives up to our expectations. So from the discovery bit, we did a roadmap and an action plan, and we're supporting them at the moment just to build out their health and safety system, doing some internal coaching and education, and then also importantly look at what their options are for resourcing, because now they're in a different space than they were 2 to 3 months ago. What's the outcomes? Well, we're providing with support. Our aim is actually to be able to get them to be well positioned, that we move on, but we can continue being a partner where needed. So it's not about securing our place in there, it's actually more about building their capability. Systems being developed and their knowledge internally on how to manage health and safety, but importantly, how to make smart decisions about managing health and safety. And they've been really important in terms of whatever their next steps will be for resourcing. So how did BErTHA come about and where did we go? So we worked out what their business expectations were. We felt that at some point they probably had some health and safety and it probably met expectations, but their capability really just was no longer meeting need. And so therefore our job was really just to make sure that we could give them an appropriate response in order to manage that. So when we look at where they were at in their journey, so we knew that they had got some arrangements in place for health and safety. They were looking to grow it and to expand it out, and they just needed to make really smart decisions as to what that might look like. And they were very much wanting to move from just having written down processes into ensuring that people were following those, they were actually managed, and then also optimizing them. So making sure it just actually became part of the way they did their business and what the steps and changes would need to be in order to do that. So if we go back, therefore, to what the initial gap analysis was and how we used BErTHA in that process. So if we flick our way over into BErTHA, so we knew that we were going to be tackling the business aspects. We wanted to understand that systems. We wanted to know about their people and culture, and then also what their cadences were around reporting and continuous improvement. So if we have a look, therefore, at BErTHA, and if I click the button correct here, you should find that we're able to move into, there we go, this is where the magic starts to happen. So if we take apart the different quadrants that we've got for BErTHA, we then actually put an Enneagram together. So one of the important aspects is not, I believe, not just always telling a business what they need to do, but also helping them understand where they think they're at. Because at least if we understand where they believe they're at, we can then see what those gaps are. Now, they might have thought that actually they were performing really well, and we might have done an analysis and gone not so, or they might have thought they weren't doing well, and actually where we felt that maybe they were performing better. So putting together a basic Enneagram with a scalable system on here, and then we put two core elements against each of BErTHA. So what you can see is those core aspects coming out. So the combination of looking at planning and resourcing, innovation, the built environment, the reporting and responsiveness, learning and diligence, looking at knowledge and capability, responsibility and accountability, and then the systematic processes. And what we asked the company to do, and then we did the gap analysis against it, was actually to score themselves so that we can understand where they felt they were at, and then we put our logic in over the top of where we were actually at. Now, the ability to do this was actually really important because we were able to identify where their strengths and weaknesses were and where attention needed to be placed. We could also identify inconsistencies. So we talked to them about their values, what their goals and strategies were, and we could identify, by getting everybody individually to do this exercise, we could also see where there were differences in opinions and trying to bring viewpoints together so that there was a common perspective in terms of moving forward. And that gave us a really good attention as to what was needed. We also were able to use a strength-based approach. We often find in health and safety that we know what we should do and we know what we shouldn't do, but the question is, how do we get there? So every business has capability and strength, and it's a case of tapping into that and trying to understand how we can purpose that for or better for health and safety. So, for example, they had already invested in some innovative technology, but they were using a document-based health and safety system. So we were able to look and say, well, can you use that new innovative system and technology you've got and couple your health and safety into it? And can we use it to purpose health and safety management? So by being able to have those sort of discussions meant that they could look at their existing business capability and structures and where they could start weaving health and safety management within. And that, importantly, settles really nicely then in terms of people, culture and leadership, because it started firmly putting health and safety responsibilities on individuals that were responsible for those areas, not just on the individual that might be tasked as the key manager or lead from a health and safety perspective. That threw up an interesting complexity, because we identified that actually those managers who had these tools and resources didn't necessarily have the skills or the capability to be able to understand how they might use them for safety and what their then ongoing responsibilities may be. So it all led well nicely back into that people, culture and leadership piece. So where capability is low and we can identify potential, that's where we'll start. Making sure that we give them opportunities to invest in areas that they're working towards. So from there, we put together a health and safety strategy and an action plan, and we were able to show them how they could close their gaps without just engaging somebody in health and safety and expecting them to be able to do so. So flipping over then back into where BErTHA sits at this point in time. So we've got the BErTHA model. We coupled that then with the health and safety sort of capability model that we have here. We created a roadmap and an action plan for them. And that was both short, medium and long term. So anything that was of an operational nature that was an immediate health and safety risk or concern clearly got traction and action first. Items that we were able to, that required some security of budget, we were able to help inform their business planning position. And we were also able to tap into where their strategic objectives and operational actions sat, so that we could make sure that health and safety got written well into those strategic priorities and imperatives. So in terms of where are we going to in the future? So for us, so far so good. We found that BErTHA works well. She's actually a neat little model. There are probably some aspects that we could wrap around her in terms of other concepts that sit within a business perspective, but from our perspective, so far so good. It seems to be a good, solid and very simple model to work with. In terms of looking forward, we're certainly looking and saying, well, how do we not only understand expectations, but enable a business to meet and outperform those, so going above expectations where possible. Certainly, I don't think the pathway or the journey is going to be necessarily easy or straightforward, and certainly both in terms of developing BErTHA, our knowledge and experience of putting in place health and safety management systems. Sometimes we feel as if we're right on track and it's working really well, and other times we have to take a step back and really think about and challenge ourselves to do better. But I think that aspirational approach of just continuing to plug away, understand, respond to, meet and exceed expectations is a mantra that we're certainly taking on board for those that for our own practice, but also those that we work with in business. So where does that lend us to going forward into the future? So if we think about next gen health and safety, we've got the needs for those working in at whatever level they are in health and safety, whether they're practitioners or professionals, whether they're individuals that, we might call them part-time professionals on the basis that they're not actually directly employed in health and safety, but they've taken on that role by virtue of the position they have within a company. So 8 key areas are those that we've identified for health and safety capability going forward. Capable, skilled and solution focused. So looking forward and being able to look for outcomes and how we achieve those. Anticipating and responding to change. So we have to. Back in the Visions conference back in 2018, I remember sitting there and going, I'm going to have to really get myself up to speed here and think about the future. And I actually came up with this concept in my head, which was I need to retire or keep relevant. And the anticipate and responding to change is about being relevant and being able to keep ourselves moving forward. And I think it was back at that conference, one of the presenters worked in health and safety at the time. And interestingly, he'd actually done an MBA. And I kind of asked him, do you think it's a relevant qualification for those working in health and safety to have? Do they need an MBA? And it's not necessarily saying that everybody has to have an MBA if you're working in health and safety, but I think it's an appreciation of having an understanding of business, and then you can start having business conversations as well as your health and safety conversations. So that's looking at appreciation of workplace culture and business practices, effective recruitment, training and development, and so getting the right health and safety person on the job and enabling them to develop within their role. Setting people up for success is certainly the approach that we're taking within our practice. and just making sure that they've got the right person on the right job, and the business recognise they need to support this individual and individuals to be able to perform at their best. So supporting and retaining top performers, good health and safety people are going to become really hard to come by in the years ahead. So keeping ourselves at the top of our game, but also businesses recognising that they need to do more to keep their top health and safety performance, and will become increasingly important. Coupling soft, technical, strategic, operational and digital skills. So we definitely become multi-capable, and we're just going to have to make sure that we have that breadth of skills beyond just our technical health and safety skills. Probably recognising the importance of not working in isolation. So the health and safety team, using those soft and other skills, has to be able to work across other aspects of a business. So a multidisciplinary approach is exactly what BErTHA is, and having some meaningful involvement and responsibilities for decision making and enabling health and safety. And finally, just forward thinking. So if we're moving into an IT enabled era, we're also stepping into the responsible and ethical use of the data, information security, data protection. So we're just having to really think about the grounds on which we introduce new concepts so that they don't compromise the business going forward. So there we go. We have our business capability model. We couple it therefore with BErTHA. We couple it with our health and safety capability. And for us at the moment, this is where we're at in terms of our health and safety journey and forward thinking. And that kind of wraps up the presentation that I've got here in terms of next gen health and safety. So it's just a recognition, I guess, of the foundations on which we've come from, the experiences we've got, looking at what business needs are, and then showcasing with yourselves the first demonstration that we've got of using the BErTHA model within practice. So I'm going to throw the question back over to you. So your thoughts on sort of next generational health and safety management. So this is well and truly beyond BErTHA. This is actually about us as a future going forward. What actions are you taking to keep across expectations, or would you plan on taking in the future? So I'm going to throw that one back out there for the chat, and it'd be great to get your thoughts and insights, and also to continue the chat afterwards. Anybody that wants to get in contact with us, you're really welcome to.
All right, well, we'll give them a little while to add to that chat session. I did put your link in the chat before, and I'll just do that again because it can get buried.
Yeah. Oh, I can answer the questions that are coming in as well. So this is actually great. I so wish this was a real chat, but anyway, I can answer the questions that you've got. So yeah, do you want to read the questions out, Sarah, or the last points, and then we can start going through them now?
Yes, so I'm just trying to go. Okay, so Maud says, was this gap analysis data capture done through a questionnaire only or interviews as well?
Really good question. So we were lucky enough to be able to do it through both, actually. So the questionnaire was set up, and we started using Microsoft Forms for questionnaires. So we're able to get viewpoints on that, and then we can bring the data in to be able to analyse and use. It was actually also done, though, through a workshop session. So the slides that you saw, the quadrants coming out and the Enneagram, that was actually done through a discovery workshop session. So and it was Naomi that ran that session. And so she was able to sit down with the staff and get their viewpoints so they could actually discuss them and look to close some of those gaps in understanding, but also gaps in current positioning in those sessions. So we used it as a data information gathering, but also importantly about aligning viewpoints in order to think about next steps.
Okay, so
it could have been done virtually. So one of the other things that we're doing is you're starting to use things like a Wacom tablet to do virtual working. So even if we can't get to a business for COVID or other reasons, we'll use virtual tablets for doing whiteboarding. So we're not letting the fact that we can't be on site be a barrier for having good conversations around health and safety.
Okay, so David said his thoughts are having a qualification such as an MBA or a good solid understanding of how business operates is essential for success as a WHS professional so that you can put safety into the context of business success.
Absolutely true, David. It was probably the conversations around MBA that really started getting me thinking about it. And that led itself actually for me to attend a presentation with business leaders where QUT Business School were at. And they, of course, deliver MBAs. And it was actually really interesting, that presentation, in terms of thinking about those broader skill sets. So I totally agree with you. So one of the great things, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but you can actually go and do micromasters online. So if you haven't seen them, it's worth doing a Google for that. You can actually go online and do things like UQ, Stanford, Cambridge Uni. They offer these really short courses that you can do where you can get really snackable type learning. So if you haven't got the time or the opportunity or the interest in doing an MBA, you can certainly find other snippets of business type information available through MicroMasters.
Yeah, there's another one, Joe, that I use, like Coursera. I think it's through some United States universities that do lots of free courses that are really good.
Yeah. I wonder, Sarah, could you drop the link for that on here just so that they can
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
And okay, so Ray says, thanks for a great presentation. It really crystallised to the future approach that needs to be taken.
Thank you, Ray.
And thank you. I'm sorry, I can only see the first two letters of someone's name for some reason. Says, thank you for the presentation. Great to get alternative views on WHS and reviewing the HSC systems we have in place in aviation, offshore, oil and gas, and wind turbine generation. And that is all of the chat there. I'll just put the link to the Coursera, which is obviously I have a marketing background, but they offer courses for all sorts of things in Coursera, and they're free and they're brilliant. They guided learning and videos and all sorts of things.
Thank you. And Ray, that's such a good point that you've got there about the biggest drawback in your safety time was failure of management to take safety seriously. So it's always interesting, isn't it, trying to engage a manager in a safety conversation when in fact we can take safety to a management conversation. And it's the ability to have those different levels of conversation that I think really challenges the space. So I see that we're lucky enough to have the shoulders on the likes of yourself, Ray, on which we stand in terms of moving forward, because at least if the conversation's there, we can have it. If it's not there, we can question why not. But it's certainly recognising all those that have trod before us to help us get to this point. Thank you.
All right. Well, that might be all the comments and questions. I will be sending this out later today as a podcast as well, which is often easier if people are busy and they're on public transport. And a link to Joe's contact information, so you can send her any questions that you have. So thanks so much, Joe. Again, another really, really good webinar. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Great to join you. Thanks to Mayosh for hosting, and also the chat and the feedback. It's really helpful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's really good to get people involved. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a really good day. I hope everything goes well if you're in Melbourne in the next week or so. And yeah, hopefully everything is good. I'll just drop a link about upcoming webinars in the chat panel here as well, so you can register. And otherwise, thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate all of that and everyone's time. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.